All right, and welcome back to Whiteboard Gematria. I'm your host, Dallas, and let's get to it. Today we're going to be taking a look at Germany, which was the trial run for the world's so-called Grand Awakening. There are many people in the world today who believe that we are going through some kind of grand awakening, some big spiritual revolution of understanding being brought about so that this whole world is going to go through a massive change of enlightenment. Well, unfortunately, it has been a giant conspiracy. It's part of the mass grand deception, and I'm going to get into that and explain how we can see through it, prepare ourselves for the upcoming catastrophes that they are planning, and why this is not what they say it is. So, starting with the Nazi symbolism, we see that it was based around the swastika. Everybody at this point in the world is pretty familiar with this, as the swastika was the first symbol of Nazism, which remains strong as associated with it even in the Western world today. Now, with that symbol, it did not originate from Germany. In fact, it has a huge long history associated with many cultures from different nations all over the world. We're going to point out this one specifically as it's associated with the Jewish symbolism of the Star of David, which isn't actually the Star of David, it's the sigil of Saturn. But we can see how it has been in, the Hopis, Christians, Malta, Tibet. All these different areas have used different forms of this swastika. Now, when we take a look at that, we actually see where it gets its origin from. So let's take a quick listen to the Theosophists. At this point, if you don't know what Theosophy is, please take a look at my Deceptions, the Grand Deception playlist, as I do a full video on exposing this group called Theosophy, as they are a Luciferian-based doctrine, hand of the teachings of the Templars in order to spread this information out by being part of the grand deception, making the whole world susceptible to the blue lodges of the Freemasons' teachings. Now, within this, we get this understanding that the connection between Freemasonry, Theosophy, and the ancient wisdom is not known by many. Their conjoined history is very old and runs equally as deep. These esoteric schools came together not only in the shared principles of their philosophies, but also in the men and women who throughout the ages have devoted their lives to the spread of the divine knowledge encapsulated within each mystery tradition. Now, when they say mystery tradition, we're talking about the Mystery Babylon. There are many named and unnamed individuals who have served as a torchbearer, but none more famous in modern times than Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a woman of excellent character whose life was of great adventure and would change the Western world forever. Blavatsky was a Russian aristocrat whose childhood was heavily influenced by Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. She spent her formative years in the vast library of her great-grandfather, a well-known Mason, and is very likely how she came to know of Masonic teachings and the fraternity and that of Rosicrucianism during this time. Now, this is the symbol in which she created, and you can see that we get the serpent eating its own tail, we get that same sigil of Saturn, the interlacing triangles, and the swastika. And now this is, we're laying a foundation here to understand why these people would do what I'm about to show that they did as part of a grand deception trial run in Germany. So by understanding these symbols, even though the words they say were lies, we can track them by their symbolism, as this is how Group A and Group B, who would otherwise not even be allowed to associate with each other, could communicate openly with these symbols. So when we take a look at one of her most profound writings, the Theosophist Blavatsky wrote Isis Unveiled, and we can see that the swastika was a major symbol right on her books, right on her religious points of view. And we can see that when Germany selected the swastika, they were communicating that they were in on this whole thing. The Rosicrucianism, which led to the Order of the Golden Dawn, and Freemasonry connected to it, which is all based upon and comes from Egyptian worship. And Egyptian worship comes from Babylonian worship. We can see the sun symbolism that is associated with the Babylonian sun gods. So we can see that this foundation is Babylon to Egypt to Rome, and continues through the Roman teachings of the Jesuits, the Knights Templar, which formed Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, the Jesuits, and Theosophy. And through the symbolism, we can catch them red-handed because she was the mother of Horus. And Horus was the sky god and often represented as a falcon or an eagle or a hawk with two wings on each side. Now we can see this symbolism associated directly with the swastika, as through this relief we can see the Horus eagle above and the swastika below. We can see this directly in Germany with the Horus eagle and sitting on top of this swastika. And this is a poster of the registry of the city of, and I'm not going to brutalize it by attempting to say it on the bottom here, but it's the registry. So we can see how Germany was established on the exact same symbolism of Babylon, Egypt, Rome, Theosophy, Rosicrucianism, Judaism, Kabbalah. All these things are all connected together as one big group. We can see even the United States uses the exact same symbols of the eagle and the sigil of Saturn as well. And we can see how that even is part of and actually promoted mostly through the Roman Empire. So here's the Roman eagle. We can see how even the UN, which the one world religion they have openly said is Theosophy, is connected with the Nazi eagle and the United States eagle. And Kabbalah-wise, well, we know that the Theosophists and Rosicrucianists have their roots in Freemasonry as well. And the Kabbalah, as referred to by Albert Pike, said all truly dogmatic religions have issued from the Kabbalah and returned to it. All the Masonic associations owe it to their secrets and their symbols, and that's how come we're going to be able to track this. So I'm really laboring this point to get you to see how they are together. And for those who don't know who Albert Pike is, well, he's the father of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and he shows that he is going both ways with the double-headed eagle, the symbol of the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, the Jesuits, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, which is all being run by the Knights Templar under the papacy, which is the Holy Roman Catholic Church. Now, understanding that they're all together on this and they're all brothers, they're all in bed together. The Kabbalah is associated with Judaism and Hebrew and the Semitic languages. And through this, this is where we're getting the understanding and the revealings of things like gematria, all these different occult practices that are coming out as part of the Grand Awakening. Well, get prepared because it's actually the Grand Deception. And they did this once as a trial run in Germany. So let's get exposing. The best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves. Vladimir Lenin. Step 1, create a conspiracy. Step 2, reveal the conspiracy. Step 3, lead an opposition against that conspiracy. Step 4, lead the newly freed state with a self-appointed leader that this group is now going to appoint, because we were so good at telling them and helping them realize there was a conspiracy, and now that group will perceive to have themselves organic freedom. So if they create a conspiracy by having, let's say, Jews and Freemasons coming together in a country and create a conspiracy, then they have another group reveal that that conspiracy is going on. Well, now you create an opposition against that conspiracy. And they're going to look for somebody, some leader, to help lead them against that now newfound conspiracy. And then they will believe that they have routed out that problem. Well, Erich Ludendorff of Germany's top military leaders announced that the Jews were one of the several groups responsible for the nation's defeat. He was focusing almost entirely on Jews as the enemy, and wrote, "The supreme government of the Jewish people was working hand in hand with France and England. Perhaps it was leading them both." As proof, he cited the Protocols of Elders of Zion, a document supposedly containing the minutes of a secret meeting of Jewish leaders. The so-called Elders of Zion held that at turn of the 20th century, at that supposed meeting, that the elders allegedly plotted to take over the world. And they went and they published this in the newspapers, and they spoke about it on the radio and in their movies. So they used propaganda to push out that there was this Jewish world plot to take over the whole world and create a Jewish state. And that's why Germany was being repressed. Now, we can see in this article, this taking a look at how Hitler began to gain power and his rise in Germany. So I'm going to read the highlighted area. We examine how Hitler and the Nazi regime attached blame to three key sources of national and personal shame: the military loss, the cultural decline, and supposed racial defilement, to Jewish people as a means of rigidifying German and Jewish identity categories. Hitler mobilized national shame, therefore to justify systematic legal exclusion and ultimately systematic violence. Thus, we posit that a causal relationship between emotions and collective violence and movements. So, by the research of these people, they were able to compile the data and look and see that because of this propaganda that Hitler was able to push into the face of the German people, that they said that these Jews created a national shame, and therefore, as a result, they got military loss, they lost their culture, and then they, as a race, were now being defiled as a result of these lies that this conspiracy of Jews were doing against them, which then caused a public response, and that allowed them to change the laws against the Jewish people, ultimately leading to being allowed to have violence upon them. Now, when we read that about the Jews and the Freemasons and how they were connected in this is pretty fascinating as well. So the Nazis claimed that high-degree Masons were willing members of this Jewish conspiracy and that Freemasonry was one of the causes of Germany's defeat in World War I. In Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler wrote that Freemasonry has succumbed to the Jews and has become an excellent instrument to fight in their aims and to use their strings to pull the upper strata of society into their designs. He continued, the general pacifistic paralysis of the national instinct of self-preservation began by Freemasonry and is transmitted to the masses of secret by the press. In 1933, and was transmitted to the masses of society by the press. In 1933, Hermann Göring of the Reichstag, president and one of the key figures in the process of this synchronization, stated that in National Socialist Germany there is no place for Freemasonry. The Enabling Act was passed by Germany's parliament on March 23, 1933. Using the act in 1934, the German Ministry of the Interior ordered the disbandment of Freemasonry and confiscation of the property of all lodges, stating that those who had been members of the lodges when Hitler came to power in January 1933 were prohibited from holding office in the Nazi Party or its parliamentary arms and were ineligible for appointment in public service. Consequently, considered an ideological foe of Nazism in their world perception, special sanctions of the Security Service and later the Reich Security Main Office were established to deal with Freemasonry. Masonic concentration camp inmates were graded as political prisoners and wore an inverted red triangle. So we can actually see that they took the Jews, combined them with the Freemasons, and said these are the enemies who are the conspiracy that is taking down Germany. On August 8, 1935, Adolf Hitler announced that the Nazi Party newspaper, through the Nazi Party newspaper, that the final dissolution of the Masonic lodges in Germany. The article accused a conspiracy of the Fraternity of the World Jewry and of seeking to create a world republic. Joseph Goebbels inaugurated an anti-Masonic exposition to display objects seized by the state. The Ministry of Defense forbade officers from becoming Freemasons, with officers who remained as Masons being sidelined. During the war, Freemasonry was banned by edict in all countries that were either allied with the Nazis or under Nazi control, including Norway and France. Anti-Masonic exhibitions were held in many occupied countries. Field Marshal Frederick Paulus was denounced as a high-grade Freemason when he surrendered to the Soviet Union in 1943. And in 1943, the anti-Masonic propaganda film Forces Occultus was produced by Nazi-occupied France, accusing the Freemasons of conspiring with Jews and Anglo-American nations to encourage France into a war with Germany. This preserved record of the RSHA, of the Office of the High Command of Security Service, which pursued the radical objectives of the Secret Service through the Race of Resettlement Office, documented the persecution of Freemasons. The number of Freemasons from Nazi-occupied countries were also killed is not accurately known, but it is estimated that between 80,000 and 200,000 Freemasons were murdered under the Nazi regime. So, the low-level Freemasons who were brought into the Freemason lodges became the victims and the sacrifice of this conspiracy. So what we end up getting is the Freemasons, who are Theosophists, Babylonians, who are actually part of the Hebrew sect of the Cabal. We see that the Rosicrucians, all of them, and we can see their symbols in the flags, in the swastika, so symbolized Hitler and his group created a conspiracy awareness that they created, and then they turned the people of Germany against that very conspiracy which they themselves created, so that the people of Germany lifted up Hitler and his group to lead them into freedom. And how did they pull this off? Entering Joseph Goebbels. Now, if I'm saying his name wrong, it is what it is. Now, Joseph Goebbels was a German Nazi politician and Reich Minister of Propaganda of Nazi Germany from 33 to 45. He was one of Adolf Hitler's closest and most devoted associates and was well known for his skills in public speaking and his deeply virulent anti-Semitism, which was evident in his publicly voiced views. He advocated progressively harsher discrimination, including the extermination of the Jews during the Holocaust. Goebbels, who aspired to be an author, obtained a Doctor of Philology degree from the University of Heidelberg in 1921. He joined the Nazi Party in 1924 and worked with Gregor Strasser as the Northern Branch. He was appointed district leader for Berlin in 1926, where he began to take an interest in the use of propaganda to promote the party with its program. After the Nazi seizure of power in 1933, Goebbels' propaganda ministry quickly gained and exerted control over the news media, the arts, and information of Germany. He was particularly adept at using the relatively new media of radio and film for propaganda purposes. Topics for party propaganda included anti-Semitism, attacks on the Christian church, and, after the start of the Second World War, attempting to shape morale. So, Mr. Goebbels, through the use of the movies, the music, the news, all social programming that was available to them, was able to change the mind of the masses. And through that, they were able to tell everyone, look, there is a Freemason and Jewish conspiracy. Look, we need to rise up as a nation against this corruption. Look, we need to take Hitler, and he is the freedom fighter who is going to lead us away from this worldwide level of Jewry and Freemasonry. We must destroy them. All the meanwhile, he was a Freemason. All the meanwhile, he was a Jesuit. All the meanwhile, he was a Theosophist. This is the grand conspiracy, that they create a conspiracy, reveal the conspiracy, turn the people against the conspiracy, and lead them to revolt against the conspiracy into the position in which they wanted, which was a Hitler Germany. And how did they do it? Through his Reich Minister of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda office. And what did he teach? Well, he taught exactly that very thing. Think of the press as a great keyboard on which the government can play. Propaganda works best when those who are being manipulated are confident they are acting on their own free will. A lie told once remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. The great masses of the people will more easily fall victims to a big lie than to a small lie. And we can see they did exactly that, as Nazi propaganda exposing the Jewish conspiracies was also linked to the Allied nations. World War II poster, Nazi propaganda poster with a diagram exposing the network of the worldwide Jewish conspiracy of Allied leaders, Roosevelt, Churchill, Stalin. The poster was issued in 1941, the slogan of the week. A series produced the Nazi Party in Germany from 1936 to 1943. The series was discontinued in 1943 because of paper shortages due to the prolonged war. Now, I don't speak and read German as well as I probably should to present this, but I can easily make out the fact that we have these exact same charts even today showing how it's the Rothschilds, it's the Jews, it's the Russians, it's the Chinese, it's the this, that, and the other, and they teach us the conspiracy. They tell it to us so that we know it's there. We can also see in this piece of propaganda they put out in 1924, which depicts the anti Semitic caricature of a Jew with a manipulative personality using workers to vote for the Nationalist Party. And we can see how that suggests that the fat cats, the Jews, had their control over the people. We could literally change that and say, based upon the days that we live in, that that could be the Rothschilds, that could be the Freemasons, that could be exactly the same thing, just say on a world stage or an American stage or a British stage. It doesn't matter because it's the same exact propaganda. We also see this propaganda piece in December 2nd, 1914, which says, "Appeal for aid for Jews. American Committee tells of suffering due to the war." The American Jewish Relief Committee called into being at a conference of more than 100 national Jewish organizations, which was held at Temple Emmanuel on October 25th, to consider the plight of more than 6 million Jews who lives within the war zone, has elected Louis Marshall chairman, Cyrus L. Sulzenberger secretary. Now, isn't it fascinating to know that in December 2nd, 1914, before Hitler rose to power and started the Holocaust, that they had already identified 6 million Jews as the ones who were going to suffer? Propaganda from the beginning. The Jews were in on it. The Nazis were in on it. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians. This is all under the Holy Roman Catholic Church Jesuit-led control. A complete guide to Illuminati signs and symbols and the meanings. Now, this is pretty fascinating to note because the Golden Dawn sign of the Zealotr Nazi salute. Well, that's very interesting because the grade of Zealotr is the second level of the Golden Dawn. The order once accounted by Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, E.A. Waiter, of tarot cards, and Bram Stoker. Well, we're familiar with them also because it was the Golden Dawn who brought forth the gematria, in which we're familiar with. If you're not familiar with that, again, please go and look at my Grand Deception playlist as I show how the Golden Dawn gematria system is the current system we are using today. At the same time with that, that's where the likes of Aleister Crowley and these massive players in the world of occult came through. Well, we can see that the Zealotr ritual is based on a ceremony concerning the Hebrew tabernacle in the wilderness described in Exodus. The secrets of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn were revealed in Israel's regard as the Golden Dawn. And he writes, "The sign is given by raising the right hand at the angle of 45 degrees. It is the position in which the Hierophant interposed for you between the Hieros and the Hegemon." And the source is the Golden Dawn, page 133. This is the Nazi salute. It's Hebrew. It's Jewish. It comes from Exodus. This is a biblical stance of the Hebrew priests. So tell me, how did a Hebrew, Jewish, Freemasonry conspiracy that was taking them down become the national symbol? We can also see that the Nazi soldiers salute Adolf Hitler with this as he leads his staff down an aisle during the opening of a National Socialist German Workers' Party convention on September 11th, 1933. So why is it they're using the exact same numbers? Hitler used the exact same numbers, has the exact same Freemason symbolism, which is this Nazi salute, which is actually Hebrew salute, and they convinced all these people, they convinced all of them that the Babylonian symbol of the swastika, that the Hebrew symbol of this arm up, all these symbols that they were being repressed by, they taught to the people to do. It's absolutely fascinating to understand when the origins of these things become plainly obvious to those who are of the initiated group, so that they could see exactly worldwide that Hitler was doing the work of the Jesuits, Freemasons, Babylonians, the Holy Roman Catholic Church. And we can see how the royal queen, Queen Elizabeth, did the Nazi salute with her family, President Obama, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, George Bush Jr., which is fascinating because George Bush Sr., well, his Prescott grandfather Bush was accused, and not only accused, but found guilty of funding the Nazis. That's right. It was the Bushes who funded Hitler. And this is common knowledge at this point in the day, as you can see even how the Guardian and, Washington Times, Global Research, they all know that he was. In fact, they made a law called the Trading with the Enemy Act in 1942 after they found out Prescott Bush was funding him. And he was actually found guilty of this, so they created this law to make it illegal to fund people that you were at war with. And not only that, it's fascinating to note that after the seizures of late 1942 of 5 U.S. enterprises he managed on behalf of Nazi industrialist Fritz Thyssen, Prescott Bush, the grandfather of President George Bush, failed to divest himself of more than a dozen enemy national relationships that continued into the late of 1951. Newly discovered U.S. government documents have revealed this. Furthermore, the war records show that Bush and his colleagues routinely attempted to conceal their activities from government investigators. Bush's partners in the secret web of Thyssen-controlled ventures, including former New York Governor Averell Harriman and his younger brother E. Roland Harriman. Their quarter century of Nazi financial transactions from 1924 to 1951 were conducted by the New York private banking firm Brown Brothers Harriman. So, let's take a quick refresher and take a listen to this, because we've got to understand that this was a trial run for what's going on in the world today. Create a conspiracy. So, they funded the conspiracy by getting the Jews and the Freemasons to be the ones that caused all the problems. 2, they went into the media and told everybody about it. 3, they caused a revolt against this, and they looked for a way to stop this oppression of this great conspiracy. 4, they put Hitler in charge of this, and they made him rise to power. And his rise to power, they gratefully lined up behind him and did everything he said as he was their savior against this great conspiracy. And step 5, they thought they were now in a better, freer state than they were beforehand, even though they literally gave up everything they had beforehand, which was better beforehand, all through propaganda. And we can see that they never actually punished anyone of importance, as the Freemasons that were persecuted and the Jews that were persecuted were just unknowing, uneducated, lower members of lodges, or just happened to be of a different racial descent than the people that were going on. So they actually created a backlash against the innocents in order to propagate this further. And we can see that as the revealing of Operation Paperclip, which was a secret program of the Joint Intelligence Objective Agency, largely carried out by special agents of the Army, in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians, such as Wernher von Braun with his V-2 rocket team, were taken from Germany to the U.S. Now, specifically, when we take a look at the higher-ups, we can see specific names as the aforementioned Wernher von Braun, but also Arthur Rudolph and Sidney Gottlieb. Now, from 1945 to 1955, Operation Paperclip granted nearly 1,000 German scientists American citizenship. Many have been longtime members of the Nazi Party and the Gestapo and had conducted experiments on humans at concentration camps and committed other war crimes. The scientists ended up in the U.S. military-industrial complex, working with the CIA, NASA, and more. One of the Nazis' experiments that continued was in America was mind control, known as the CIA's project of MKUltra. And this is exactly what Albert Pike wrote. The Second World War must be fermented by taking advantages of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that the Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism will be strong enough to institute a sovereign state in Israel. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until that time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm, which he wrote before in the letters of 1871, before the whole event went down. So you can see that this is a plan. It's a very big plan. It's an old plan, and the whole trial run in Germany went off perfect as it established Israel as a nation. Isn't it interesting how a Jewish Freemason conspiracy being revealed in Germany went about and created the country of Israel exactly like they wanted, and the whole mass went right along with it. Now, we understand why Vladimir Lenin said, the best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves. The next step in the world's grand awakening, well, wash, rinse, repeat. The 3 steps to living a life that they love. Next stop, USA and the world. As Abraham Lincoln said, the most reliable way to predict the future is to create it. And just as we see the propaganda of Goebbels in the German world, which brought about revolution against the Freemasons and the Jews, we see William Casey, the CIA director, saying, we'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. That's right. They did the same thing there that they are doing here. And we get our own Goebbels by the name of Edward Bernays, who was born November 22nd, which was an Austrian-American pioneer in the field of public relations and propaganda, referred to in his obituary as the father of public relations. Bernays was named one of the 100 most influential Americans of the 20th century by Life magazine. He was the subject of a full-length biography of Larry Tye called The Father of Spin, and later an award-winning 2002 documentary by the BBC by Adam Curtis called The Century of the Self. His best-known campaigns began in 1929 as an effort to promote female smoking by branding cigarettes as feminist torches of freedom, and his work for the United Fruit Company connected with the CIA orchestrated overthrow of the democratically elected Guatemalan government. Yeah, it's not about cigarettes anymore, government overthrows, just as we talked about through this whole thing with Germany. He worked for dozens of American corporations, including Procter & Gamble, General Electric, and for government agencies, politicians, and nonprofit organizations. Of his many books, Crystallizing Public Opinion and Propaganda gained special attention as early efforts to define and theorize the field of public relations. Citing works of writers such as Gustav Le Bon, Wilfred Trotter, Walter Lippmann, and his own double uncle, Sigmund Freud, he described the masses as irrational and subject to herd instinct, and outlined how skilled practitioners could use crowd psychology and psychoanalysis to control them in desirable ways. And said, if we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is now possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without them knowing it. Sounds exactly like Goebbels, who said the best propaganda is to manipulate those people into thinking that what they're doing is their own thoughts. Edward Bernays, the father of American propaganda. Tell a lot of the truth, but never tell the whole truth. Propaganda, a message designed to persuade its intended audience to think or behave in a certain manner, thus advertising is commercial propaganda, or institutionalized and systematic spreading of information and or disinformation, usually to promote a narrow political or religious view. The consciousness and intelligence manipulation of the organized habits, and that definition was actually from the businessdirectory.com. Now we listen to their words. The conscious and intellectual manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of the country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, and our ideas are suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. If they who pull the wires that control the public mind, it is they who pull the wires and control the public mind, says Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud's nephew, in his book, Propaganda. And that's exactly what they did. So, what did they do in Germany? They told you there was so they created a conspiracy. Then they told you there was a conspiracy. Well, what are we going through in North America and on a worldwide basis now that that trial run is done? Because it was massively successful in that tiny little place of Germany. This is what they did.
I thought that it was a matter of real concern that planted stories intended to serve a national purpose abroad came home and were circulated here and believed here, because this would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. Now, we're looking at that very carefully.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to a major circulation American journal?
We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks?
This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
At CBS, we had been contacted by the CIA. As a matter of fact, by the time I became the head of the whole news and public affairs operation in 1954, the ships had been established, and I was told about them and asked if I'd carry on with them.
We have quite a lot of detailed information, and we will evaluate it, and we will include any evidence of wrongdoing or any evidence of impropriety in our final report and make recommendations.
Do you have any people being paid by the CIA who are contributing to the national news services, AP and UPI?
Well, again, I think we're getting into the kind of detail, Mr. Chairman, that I'd prefer to handle in executive session.
Senator, do you think that you named the news organizations in your final report?
That remains to be decided.
I think it was entirely in order for our correspondents at that time to make use of CIA agent chiefs of station and other members of the executive staff of CIA as sources of information which were useful in their assessments of world conditions.
Would you say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
So we can see the great revealing in the U.S. has begun. So just as we saw in Germany, step one is to reveal that there's so step one is creating a conspiracy. Step two is reveal the conspiracy to the people.
I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. But I do ask every publisher, every editor, and every newsman in the nation to re-examine his own standards and to recognize the nature of our country's peril. In time of war, the government and the press have customarily joined in an effort based largely on self-discipline to prevent unauthorized disclosures to the enemy. In times of clear and present danger, the courts have held that even the privileged rights of the First Amendment must yield to the public's need for national security. Today, no war has been declared, and however fierce the struggle may be, it may never be declared in the traditional fashion. Our way of life is under attack. Those who make themselves our enemy are advancing around the globe. The survival of our friends is in danger, and yet no war has been declared. No borders have been crossed by marching troops. No missiles have been fired. If the press is awaiting a declaration of war before it imposes the self-discipline of combat conditions, then I can only say that no war ever posed a greater threat to our security. If you are awaiting a finding of clear and present danger, then I can only say that the danger has never been more clear, and its presence has never been more imminent. It requires a change in outlook, a change in tactics, a change in missions by the government, by the people, by every businessman or labor leader, and by every newspaper. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match.
So, it's absolutely fascinating to hear that speech in enlightened eyes and ears, as though it could be specifically said by Hitler in Germany. As we understood, it attacks the freedoms of the people, the repression of their society, their group as a whole coming under attack underneath this secret conspiracy that is coming to get them. It's absolutely fascinating. Wash, rinse, repeat. They did it in Germany, and now we understand why they, quote unquote, killed JFK after this, to give that speech of conspiracy the highest level of legitimacy. Yet we forget that JFK was the president. He was a descendant of the King John of England in the same manner that all presidents except for one was a descendant of. He was a Rosicrucian. He was a Freemason. And no Freemason will divulge any information that he otherwise isn't told to divulge. And in the same manner, revealed a grand conspiracy. Step 1, create a conspiracy. Step 2, tell us about it.
91 closed-door meeting of fellow internationalists, billionaire and former CFR chairman David Rockefeller praised his media allies, but his confidence that his words would not leave the room was later broken.
We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications whose directors have attended our meetings and restricted their policies of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the right of publicity. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government.
It reveals that these men aim to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole.
Now, we know that this domination of world control was already in play. The Roman Holy Empire already had this domination. This is a purposeful leak. This is a purposefully exposed so that we know. Just as they would not release and allow Fahrenheit 9/11 unless they wanted you to know there was a conspiracy. Just as they would not tell you and make a movie about Edward Snowden if he was really out there expressing things they didn't want you to know. It's time to wake up, people. This is a replay. This is propaganda, and we are the willing sheep who want to know that there is a conspiracy, that we want to know all the fingers involved, but what we're not willing to know is that this conspiracy is purposed so that we know there's a conspiracy, so that we will revolt against this conspiracy. Architects for engineers would not be allowed to exist if they were to expose something they didn't want exposed. But they have websites, they have videos, and they're allowed to expose.
I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. Well, I don't suppose we can wait for some alien race to come down and threaten us, but I think that between us we can bring about that realization. In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war? I think maybe I'd answer it this way. I keep, in my frustration sometimes, you know, actually, if you count some of the things going on in smaller countries and all, there have been about 114 wars since World War II. But I've often wondered, what if all of us in the world discovered that we were threatened by a power
from outer space, from another planet, wouldn't we all of a sudden find that we didn't have any differences between us at all? We were all human beings, citizens of the world, and wouldn't we come together to fight that particular threat?
That's right, for all you people who think that the alien conspiracy is us discovering their lies. No, they told us about it too. They've told us about every conspiracy. We did not discover a thing. They created a conspiracy. They educated us to the conspiracy. And now we're getting revved up to revolt against the conspiracy. This is the grand deception. Their propaganda teaches us. Their media teaches us. Their music teaches us. Everything they produce teaches us that there's a conspiracy, that we need to revolt, that there's a world order coming and it's going to crush us all, and we better fight back, we better prepare, and we better win or else.
Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace. An era in which the nations of the world, East and West, North and South, can prosper and live in harmony. 100 generations have searched for this elusive path to peace, while 1,000 wars raged across the span of human endeavor. And today that new world is struggling to be born. A world quite different from the one we've known. A world where the rule of law supplants the rule of the jungle. A world in which nations recognize the shared responsibility for freedom and justice. A world where the strong respect the rights of the weak.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law. Such is a world worthy of our struggle and worthy of our children's future. And now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order. In the words of Winston Churchill, a world order in which the principles of justice and fair play protect the weak against the strong. A world where the United Nations, freed from Cold War stalemate, is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
They've told us everything. They've told us it was the UN. They told us it was the Freemasons. They told us it was the Jews. They told us it was the whites. They told us it was everyone. They have set us up against everyone. This is the grand conspiracy. The Freemasonic oaths, binding myself under no less penalty than having my throat cut from ear to ear, my tongue torn out by its roots, and my body burned in the rough sands of the sea, a cable length from the shore where the tide. Oath of the first degree. Binding myself under no less penalty than having my left breast torn open and my heart plucked out and given to the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air as prey. Second degree oath. Binding myself under no less penalty than having my body severed in twain, my bowels taken out and burned to ashes, the ashes scattered to the four winds of heaven. The third Mason degree. In willful violation whereof I incur the fearful penalty of having my eyeballs pierced to through center with a three-edged blade, and my feet flayed and forced to walk on hot sands upon the sterile shores of the Red Sea until the flaming sun shall strike with a livid plague, and may Allah of the God of Arab, Muslim, and Mohammedan, the God of our fathers, support me to the entire fulfillment of the same, the oath of obligation, the ancient Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine. In the U.S., the Shriners. You must conceal all the crimes of your brother Masons. You should be summoned as a witness. Should you be summoned as a witness against your brother Mason, be always sure to shield him. If it may be perjury to do this, it is true, but you are keeping your obligations. The Handbook of Masonry. If they are sworn to secrecy of their truth, then why do they openly teach us this? Because this isn't the truth. This is their truth that they want us to believe. The Jesuits, who say in their oath, I furthermore promise and declare that I will, when opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to exacerbate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, or bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and the wombs of their children, and crush their infants' heads against the walls, in order to annihilate forever their race, that when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poison cup and strangle their cord. It's just disgusting. And what is so disgusting about it? Well, what does Tim Kaine, Donald Trump, and Pope Francis have in common? Well, all three men were educated by Jesuits, the religious order of the Catholic priests, whose most famous member is the Pope himself. For Trump, his 2 years at Fordham University, a Jesuit school in the Bronx, seemed to leave little impact on his life. After his sophomore year, Trump transferred to the Ivy League University of Pennsylvania. What compelled him to transfer from his hometown Jesuit university? Well, he said, I decided that as long as I had to be in college, I might as well test myself against the best. Adolf Hitler said, make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. Trump said, you tell the people a lie 3 times, they will believe anything. You tell the people what they want to hear, play to their fantasies, and then you close the deal. In his book, The Art of the Deal. Trump, with his hand with the Queen, the secret fellowcraft hand of the Freemasons. Trump is not a good man. He is just the next in line of the deceivers. He is as much a Jesuit and leader of the evil as they all are. And he has sworn this disgusting oath. He was even told to us that he would be coming in the Illuminati card game. If they've sworn all this oath to keep everything quiet, unto their own torture, why did they tell us it was coming unless they wanted us to know? Why would they make Event 201 a website with videos telling us what was coming if they didn't want us to know? Why would they all at the same time tell us about Trump's Crimson Contagion practice, which happened right before Event 201? Why would every one of their media tell us? Well, they already told us in their own quotes, the best way to lead the opposition is to be the opposition, is to use propaganda is to teach them what we want them to know so that they will do what we want them to do. They leak out everything. Brave Chinese stood up and declared that it was the Chinese government that created the coronavirus. The foreign minister said so. But nothing spreads like fear. It's all propaganda. It's all propaganda. Step 1, create a conspiracy. Step 2, teach them the conspiracy. Step 3, lead them out of the conspiracy.
I have 10 minutes. I wasn't sure I was going to get to this stage, but I can't help but say something about this whole coronavirus thing, if you want me to. So, again, when you know Steiner, you have the answers to the test, but you have to then figure out the details. In 1918, after the huge, biggest pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, Steiner was asked, what was this all about? And he said, well, viruses are simply excretions of a toxic cell. Viruses are pieces of DNA or RNA with a few other proteins. They bud out from the cell. They happen when the cell is poisoned. They are not the cause of anything. And the first way I would encourage you to think about this is if you are a famous dolphin doctor, right? And you have been studying dolphins in the Arctic Circle for hundreds of years, or at least a long time, and the dolphins were fine. And then they call you up, Fred, all the dolphins, or a lot of the dolphins are dying in the Arctic Circle. Can you come and investigate? Right? And you have one question to ask. So, show of hands. How many of you would say, I want to investigate a dolphin to see the genetic makeup of that dolphin? Nobody, because that's stupid. How many of you would say, I want to see if this dolphin and that dolphin has a virus because it might be contagious and that's why all these dolphins are getting sick? That fellow. How many of you would say, excuse my French here, somebody put some shit in the water here? Like Exxon Valdez? Anybody? Everybody. Because that's what happened. And the cells get poisoned. They try to purify themselves by excreting debris, which we call viruses. If you go to the current theory of viruses called exosomes, and the latest head of the NIH giving a talk on the complexity of viruses, you will see this is perfectly in line with the current thinking on what a virus really is. I had a dramatic example of this when I was growing up. Right outside our house, there was a wetlands, and they were full of frogs, and the frogs kept me up at night, so I taped the windows, and they were, in the spring, they made a big racket, and then over time, the frogs were all gone. How many thinks the frogs had a genetic disease? How many thinks the frogs had a virus? How many think somebody put DDT into the water? That's what happened. Diseases are poisoning. It's one of the reasons why vaccines, so let me skip that for a minute. So what happened in 1918? There was a huge, in every pandemic in the last 150 years, there was a quantum leap in the electrification of the earth. In 1918, late fall of 1917, there was the introduction of radio waves around the world. Whenever you expose any biological system to a new electromagnetic field, you poison it, you kill some, and the rest go into a kind of suspended animation so that, interestingly, they live a little bit longer and sicker. And then starts in World War II with the next pandemic with the introduction of radar equipment all over the Earth, blanketing the entire Earth in radar fields. First time humans have ever been exposed to that. In 1968, there was the Hong Kong flu, and it was the first time the Earth has a protective layer in the Van Allen belt, which essentially integrates the cosmic fields from the sun and the Earth, from the moon and Jupiter, etc., integrates that and essentially distributes that to the living beings of the Earth. And we put satellites emitting radioactive frequencies in the Van Allen belt. Within 6 months, we had a new viral pandemic. Why viral? Because the people are poisoned, they excrete toxins, they look like viruses. People think it's a flu epidemic. In the 1918 epidemic, the Boston Health Department decided to investigate the contagiousness of this. So they, believe it or not, took hundreds of people with the flu and they sucked the snot out of their nose and injected it into the healthy people who didn't have the flu, and not one time could they make the next person sick. They did this over and over again, and they were not able to demonstrate contagion. They even did it with horses who apparently got the Spanish flu, and they put bags over their head, and the horses sneezed in the bag, and they put the bag over the next horse, and not one horse got sick. You can read about this in a book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, who chronicles all the steps in the electrification of the Earth and how within 6 months there was a new flu pandemic all over the world. And when you hear the normal explanations, how did it go from Kansas to South Africa in 2 weeks? So the entire world got the symptoms at the same time, in spite of the fact that the mode of transportation was horseback and boats, and there's no explanation for it. They just say, we don't know how that happened. But when you think about it, with these radio waves and other frequencies that some of you have in your pocket and on your wrist, you can send a signal to Japan and it arrives instantaneously. So any of you who don't believe, there is an electromagnetic field that communicates globally within seconds, just is not paying attention to this. And I will only finish by pointing out that there has been a dramatic and quantum leap in the last 6 months with the electrification of the Earth. And I'm sure a lot of you know what that is. It's called 5G, where they now have 20,000 radiation-emitting satellites, just like the radiation-emitting thing in your pocket and on your wrist and that you use all the time. That is not compatible with health. I'm sorry to say it. It's not compatible with health. That is a water destructuring device. And for any of you who say, yeah, we're not electrical beings, we're just physical matter, then don't bother doing an EKG or an EEG or a nerve conduction test, because we are electrical beings and the chemicals are only the byproduct of those electrical impulses. And I'll finish with, anybody want to make one guess as to where the first completely blanketed 5G city in the world was? Exactly.
We live in a world of deception and lies, people. They knew that they were going to establish this new field. They knew that it was going to cause a pandemic, and they got us all prepared. They purposefully put on sale toilet paper. They purposefully put on sale flour. They purposefully told us beforehand to put us all into our houses, and now they're going door to door, making sure that they can have easy disposal of those who are going to die from this new field of radiation. There's no virus. There never was. They knew this was coming. That's why those rich people are all ditching out and they're going underground, because they don't want to go and live in a microwave. And that's what they've left us to do, is sit here and cook as they turn on the system, one switch at a time, seeing how many people are going to drop. This is a worldwide crucial situation. Now, those who are old are going to die first. Those who are sick already are going to die next. This is a controlled rollout, and they're doing it systematically, and they're going to try to keep it until the ends justify their means. They've told us about this so that we think it's a virus. They told us about it so we would think that it was a pandemic of control. They told us this was a conspiracy leading up as a global deception, a continuation and out of the trial of Germany. And those who survive this are going to come to a new understanding of world conspiracy. March 23rd, 2020. Global deception technology industry. Market worldwide is projected to grow by 2.3 billion, driven by a compounded growth of 15.4%. Solutions, one of the segments analyzed and sized in this study, display the potential growth of over 14. That's right, there is a global deception industry, people. They are purposefully doing this. This isn't a joke. This is a business. And you can read this for yourselves. I'm not going to get into all of this. The website is right here for us. You can go and type it in and you can find it. This comes right from Global Newswire. It's a summary of it. They even have competitors. This is a competing industry of liars who are making money per doing this. It's time to wake up. We live in a world of deception. Everything is propaganda lies in order to make you do what they want you to do. I would buy this and read it all to you, but the report is $4,500. World deception, the lead up to a worldwide revolution and social cataclysm and despair that will lead many to accept their new savior, just as Germany was led into the hands of Hitler. And we've been warned. And Jesus said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. Take heed that this is a war of deception. Thessalonians 2:3-4, for all those who believe that we are going through this great awakening, who think for some reason we are coming into this understanding of conspiracy. Oh no, we are not in any way. There is no great awakening. It's the great falling away. Lest no man deceive you by any means, that the returning of the Lord shall not come, unless there come a falling away first, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. No, people, this is not a great awakening. This is not a great truth-finding time. This is the time of the great falling away. And it is the building up of the new one world religion. For it was given to him power to make war with the saints and overcome them. And all that are left, all that dwell upon the earth, shall worship him. Germany, the trial run for the so-called world's grand awakening. Don't be fooled. Do not be deceived. And wherever you are, I hope this finds you well. God bless.